Okay, so like I said, welcome everyone. Happy New Year, and I hope everyone had a very wonderful and blessed Christmas. Tonight, I will say I am very, very delighted to have two dear people that mean a lot to me, um, Nikki Garza and Kevin Randall, here with us tonight. I will allow them after we pray to give their own little backdrop here and the wonderful work that they do, of which me and my family have been recipients of. So I can personally attest to the beauty of the work that they do with families. Um, they're going to speak to us tonight on the attachment theory, tonight and next month. And they have developed an integrated attachment model that is just so beautiful. And as I listen to them myself, not only as a mother, but as a spiritual director, I realized how much they truly, in their own way of um, looking at this from a psychological, emotional perspective, really spoke the beauty of how we as human persons are created from a triune God, and we are made to connect and to commune with one another, that's in our spiritual and human DNA. And they speak so beautifully about that, about the different difficulties and about ways of healing. And so I really want to welcome Nikki and Kevin, and I know that we will all be blessed by this um, presentation this month and next. So before we begin, I would like to start with a prayer and then um, send it over to Nikki and Kevin. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Oh, good and gracious Father, we just praise you and thank you for all that you are, for the blessing of the love of which we were created, this love as a Trinity that did not need us, but desired us into existence, and out of love sustains us in our existence in all of creation. And this love that unites us gives us a taste of our heavenly home. I thank you for the blessing that we have tonight to speak and to listen and to learn. I ask that you would bless and protect us tonight so that all that you desire for the Holy Spirit to give to us, that our hearts may be open and receptive to absorb from your loving hand. We entrust ourselves to our sweet Mother Mary and her maternal care and the protection of Saint Joseph as we pray. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Christ our King, thy kingdom come. Saint Joseph, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, with that, Nikki and Kevin, I'm going to say, take it over.
Oh, thank you. Wonderful to be with you all tonight. I just want to do a mic check. You can hear us still good? We're on?
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. Well, we just feel honored, and Janet, thank you for even inviting us and thinking of us, and grateful that we get to share our knowledge and experience, and hope that it will help many other people throughout the world. So we're going to do a quick introduction, and then we're going to share our screen. We've got a presentation that we'll go over and talk about that. But we'll start first. Do you want to go first or me?
You go ahead.
All right, I'll share it. Now, here's the first thing we always get asked is if we're married, because we've been working together for 10 years. That's like the first question. We're not to each other, but we do have fun. We've been together about 10 years in our career, and have really enjoyed working with one another. So you're welcome to make fun of Kevin with me, but if he starts to make fun of me is when you can give some eyes like I just so I'm Nikki Garza. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and have been working in the mental health industry for a little over 20 years. And I've worked in a wide range of places, but mostly I've ran residential treatment centers. And recently I've started a company called the Family Intensive Institute. And what we do is families from all over the country have come and spend a couple of days with us, and we do some intensive family therapy with the goal to keep the family together, to heal where it needs to be healed, and to help strengthen those family bonds and heal if there's some mental illness in it. And the most important thing you need to know about me is that I have a 3-year-old that is the love and joy of my life. And we have so much fun together, my husband and I. So that's me.
And my name is Kevin Randall. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I have worked in most recently right now is the Family Intensive Institute, which Nikki and I started. And prior to that, worked in a residential treatment center for young adult women. And prior to that, in a residential treatment center for adolescents. And then before that was working with adolescents who came out of wilderness programs, residential programs, and helping them with the transition home. So I had the pleasure of going across the country and flying and going into people's homes and spending a couple of days with them as they managed the transition back home, which was really exciting. I am a father of 5. I've been married for 28 years and um, have and I'm now a grandfather. So I have a almost 20-month-old granddaughter who is so much fun, but who I also believe is a little petri dish of bringing sicknesses around, actually. She's just so huggable. I think everybody just does. So anyway, so that's me. I will tell you this, one of the greatest joys of my life has really been the work that Nikki and I have been able to do together in creating this adult attachment model. Um, we'll tell a little bit of that story here in just a little bit, but families have always been important to me. I grew up in a family of 12 kids, and families just has always been a joy, and it's been something that I've always wanted to be able to help where there's been a need. And so being able to look at attachment as a way to work with mental illness has been such an amazing journey. And I hope that as we go through all of this tonight, that you all feel the same way about attachment, and that you're able to see applications for how this will work in people that you work with.
Yeah, so we are going to share our screen. We've got a presentation, and what we will send over the slides to Janet, and she can send those out. So you'll have our information and diagrams, so you can use that. So you don't have to try to take a bunch of notes with it. And I'm so grateful for technology that we are able to. I have to share sound. Hold on, I can't multitask in technology. All right, just want to make sure. Let me make. All right, you can see the slideshow. Okay, so
Perfect.
I wish we were all together and that we could get to know each one of you and have more of an intimate connection and hear your stories as well. But I am grateful for Zoom and that you get to see our stuff and we can present that to you. With that said, we won't be able to see you all. If you have any questions as we go through, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will do our best to answer them at the end. Or Janet, you can interrupt us at any time if you see something or want us to address something as we go forward. And we're gonna spend quite a bit of time in just some education and knowledge. So what we want to do is describe attachment from a mental health perspective, and so really looking at what that means, and then we want to look at diagnosis and behavior through the lens of attachment. So we are going to spend some time in some clinical application and clinical terms, and then we want to introduce this concept of caregivers and how they can decrease a seeker or another individual's unhealthy behaviors, And then we are going to talk about this concept of attunement and attunement in the caregiver relationship and the power that that can have to create change in another person. So tonight, in our time together tonight, we're going to spend a lot of time laying the foundation of this model, because it's important that you have a lens and a map and how to see people, how to see their behaviors, and really understand the basic biological need that every human has. And so we are going to spend a lot of time in education. Our next time together next month, we're going to do a lot of application. So we'll give you tools and skills of how to apply the concepts we're teaching tonight. And we will be able to have a lot more kind of conversation at that point as well, in terms of how you would apply this in your work or in your own life, and get into some of the case studies with that. So that's where we're headed tonight together, and hopefully what we can accomplish together.
And I just invite you, as we go through this, try and plug in people that you're working with or that you know into this model, so you can kind of use it as you go. It is really a great map.
Yeah. In bringing that to your awareness of who you may know, or making it personal, is going to help in solidifying the concepts we're going to talk about. So just an understanding of where we started with this, and how we came to be. Both Kevin and I are transplants into Texas, about you 10 years ago, me 9 years ago, and we came here in running a residential treatment center for young adult women. And what we found, both of us have some extensive history in all sorts of modalities of therapy, and in helping people in creating change. But what we noticed was that there was still this strong label. When I first got here, it was this label of being bad, or I'm so borderline, or I'm this narcissist, or anything. They would label themselves in this way, and they had so much treatment and so much work that we were trying to figure out, how do we actually make an influence and an impact where we stop the cycle of needing so much treatment, and then we can actually help heal the person. And so that's what led us down this path of identifying in the research, what is it showing, and how can we actually get after and make change for someone. You want to share your part?
Yeah. So when I came 10 years ago, I remember sitting in a group with the clients at the treatment center that we work at, and I'd asked the clients how many years of therapy they had prior to coming to this treatment center. And there were 6 clients in this group, and I asked them that question, and it was a total of 64 years worth of therapy combined that they had all had. And so, and it was pretty astonishing. And there they were at the beginning of the program, and trying to, to do another year-long program after already having so much therapy before. And I went up to Nikki's office, and Nikki was the executive director. And so I went into her office and woke her up from her nap, because that's what executive directors do, sitting in their office, right? So and said, we have to be able to do something different. Everybody's coming with the same work that they've always done, and there's a different way to do this. There has to be a different way to do this. The same modalities that these clients had in their last treatment center with their last therapist clearly aren't helping, right? Because here we are, and then this clinical team is supposed to do the same thing, using the same modalities. And so we pulled out the big sticky white papers, the notepad, and started sticking those on the wall and taking notes about those things that we saw as being most beneficial in our history of working in different places, of what has created the most success. And as we did that, we really came down to the understanding that this connection, this enduring bond is at the heart of healing for individuals and for families.
So that led us on this journey, and we've created the integrated attachment model. And so we have to start with defining what is attachment. And so here's how we define attachment. So attachment is an enduring bond, if there's anything you remember. So we're not talking about like, I'm attached to my phone, or I'm attached to this way of thinking or this way of being. It's between two people or more, and it's an enduring bond. it means that I know that if I leave the room, or if I leave the state, or if I mess up, that that person's still going to be there for me and I can come back. And we'll talk more about what it means of secure attachment. But in secure attachment, if secure attachment in childhood is present, then it's an attachment where the infant or child feels safe and protected consistently. When we look at young adults or adults, what this means for them, secure attachment means that we can have these concepts of low anxiety in relation to connection and abandonment, with low avoidance of intimacy and dependence. So what that means is I won't feel anxious in that you're going to leave me, and I won't avoid being in relationship. I won't avoid commitment if I have secure attachment. If it doesn't go well, then it's typically I'm anxious that people are going to leave me, or not there for me. I can't trust relationships, and they avoid commitment or dependency or connection or belonging, any of that. And they'll do that in a number of ways. So that's what we mean by attachment, is this enduring bond. Anything you want to? So we're going to do just some nerdy stuff for a minute, which I really love, which is all about the brain. So we're going to have a really fast neural lesson. So we're going to look at the brain. So we're going to use my hand as a model. So if you were to cut my head open, this would be like how my brain would be situated. Hopefully my brain would be bigger than my wrist if we actually did, or my hand. But Kevin usually
I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, I was like, he made a face back there, huh, Jen?
Exactly.
So if we look at the brain is composed of three main parts. It's a very complicated organ, but it is also has three main parts of it. So the first part is this brainstem and low brain, and that's the reptilian brain. And that part of the brain is always asking, am I safe? And so the reptilian brain controls all of the things we don't think about. It controls our blood pressure and our heart rate, our breathing, our blinking, our digestion, all of the things that we're not consciously thinking of. And it's a constantly, am I safe? Is my heart beating? Am I breathing? Like all of that. And it's automatic. We don't have to think about that, thank goodness. So the next part of the brain is this middle part, the mammalian part of the brain. And this is called the limbic system. It happens right in this part. And the limbic system is asking, am I loved? And this part of the brain is all about emotions, behaviors, habits, attachments. This is where our drive, our pain, our fight, flight, freeze, everything, and our memory all happens in here. So memory happens in the hippocampus, and it's all in this part of the brain. And again, this part is asking, am I loved? And then the top part of the brain is this neocortex. This is the most human part of the brain. This is our rational part of the brain. This is where language develops. This is where thoughts and reasoning, stories, planning, and there's this part of the prefrontal cortex, which is this frontal part here. That's where we can start to build skyscrapers and do algebra, and we're creating, we're organizing and using a planner. All of that part of the brain is asking, what can I learn? What can I learn? So what happens in our development when we start to develop in utero is we develop from the bottom to the top. And so the very first thing that happens is the heart and brainstem start happening. So that's what we look for, is that heartbeat. And the brainstem is starting practicing getting that heartbeat going and regulating. And that's the very first thing that comes online. And it's always focused on the safety. Am I safe? Then as we develop, the limbic system is a bigger part of it, and this rational part, this what can I learn part, is actually coming more online as we grow. And as we now know, it's a continual part that happens, but we come out of the womb not really understanding, like, can I learn? What can I learn? We're more focused on, as a baby, what happened? So like, what's in this world? Why am I not in my mom's tummy anymore? But that the part that's fascinating for me is that this part develops in about over the span of our lifetime, but really about into 24 to 27 years old is when this is fully available for us. Well, what happens is when we, in our brain, if we feel stressed or threatened, so if we may lose our job, or if we have problems in our relationships, or if our kids are having problems, or any of that happens, our brain flips its lid. You ever heard that phrase before? Like somebody, they just flip their lid, and literally this part of the brain goes offline. That what can I learn goes offline, and its only focus is on, am I loved? Am I safe? And so what tends to happen is we when we see these people who are struggling, if we look at it just from like a parent perspective, when we see our kids who are in this place of struggle, if they, if they're like having an emotional breakdown, we'll just talk about my 3-year-old, right? And his lid is flipped and he's not thinking, we tend as parents to always try to talk to the part of the brain that's online. We start trying to teach these skills. We're like, if you just calm down, talk to me nicely, talk to me respectfully, any of that stuff, we're talking to the part of the brain that's not online. And so it's important to remember that we will first and foremost, as soon as we feel any stress or threat, we're going to flip our lid, and it's going to be, am I loved? Anything you want to add with that? All right. So now let's look at, these first little bit, we're just going to do just some basic foundational stuff.
So we have as part of our system, it's called the attachment system, and all of us have them. And so this quote I really like. So it says, human beings are social mammals, and all social mammals regulate each other's physiology and alter the internal structure of each other's nervous system through the synchronous exchange of emotions. This interactive regulatory relationship is the basis for attachment. So there's a lot of power in knowing that we change another person through the relationship. And so we'll be able to see some of this as we go along, of just how powerful that is. This is what we're talking about with attachment. I can alter the structure of another person's nervous system. Think about that in terms of trauma, or depression or anxiety. Like my presence, my attachment can help alter other person's nervous system. And that is a powerful concept. And when we look at that, we get to cut through a lot of other things, right? Even if I'm thinking about a variety of therapeutic modalities, we're cutting through a whole cognitive approach and really addressing things at the very basic heart of human beings, that we are wired for connection and we change each other in relationship. That is a powerful concept.
So then when we look at, because often, especially in the psychology world, attachment is often looked at this mother and baby. But really, attachment is throughout our whole life.
Yeah, I think as we've been doing presentations and talking to different people, it's always actually really important for us to pause and let people know that we aren't talking about blaming moms when we talked about attachment, because there is so much of attachment that has focused on moms and babies. And so when we're looking at this concept of attachment, there's far more involved than the relationship between mom and babies.
Yes. And so understanding that we all as adults still have attachment, and we still can be affected both for the positive and negative through the relationship of another. And we can have that syncing up of emotions in our regulatory system throughout the whole lifestyle. And what the difference is that in an adult attachment, we will vacillate between the concept of like, I sometimes need to be taken care of and you're the caregiver, and then we'll take over. So or we'll switch roles. And so it's this kind of going back and forth between what's called the caregiver or the receiver. And so this quote is really helpful. A major difference between adult attachment and child parent attachment is that the attachment behavior system in adults works reciprocally. I always say that word. You smiled. Dang it. Adult partners are not usually placed permanently in the role of the attachment figure caregiver or attached individual care receiver. Both attachment and caregiving behavior are observable in adults, and partners shift between the two roles. So that's what we want to remember, is that we can shift in an adult relationship between the two roles, and we have a responsibility for how we show up in our relationship.
Yeah, and when we talk about the care receiver, the word that we'll use for that as we go through this is seeker. So we'll have the caregiver and the seeker. And in a parent-child relationship, we have the parent as the caregiver and the adult child would be the seeker. And that's a role that generally doesn't flip. So there might be times later on in life where those roles switch, where, through the development of life, it's time for the younger generation to take care of the older generation. That caregiver-seeker relationship switches a little bit. But parents are the caregivers, and the child is the seeker. And then, as Nikki was talking about, in let's say marriage or in a peer-to-peer relationship, sometimes we seek out from somebody else and are given this care, and that role will switch back.
So, and I think this might be our last quote slide for a little bit. So the nerdy quotes are almost over. You guys are doing good hanging in there, but it helps in setting the foundation and having a common language. And I think understanding especially what attachment therapy is, and hopefully it can be something that can help relate in the work that you're doing and in the important work that you're all doing with people from all over the world. And that understanding that it attachment therapy is a neurobiological experience. So what we mean by this is when I interact with someone, or what we would call clients, and I'm an available, responsive, and secure caregiver. And so within my interaction of neuroception, they experience me as such. Then we enter a space where empathy, learning, joy, connection, self-wonderment, flexibility, and resilience can be experienced. So through what we're saying there is that through my ability to be available and responsive and secure, and through another person's ability to receive that, it creates space for all of this learning and empathy and joy, all of that. And when we do this, we are either creating a window of tolerance, or we're expanding the window of tolerance that allows for the development of safe, intimate connection in the person's life. And it decreases their need for other behaviors, or what we will call secondary attachment strategies. These behaviors that keep them in pain or keep them disconnected from other people. And so that's the power of it, is that it's in this experience and really having this connection that creates the space for all of that to come together.
Yeah, this realization is really a pretty big deal. When we're saying that attachment therapy is a neurobiological experience, for me, generally what I see in the therapy world is that the majority of people are making therapy a cognitive experience. It's what I say, what I teach that you're learning that's going to help you change your mind. If I give you the education, you're going to change your mind. And what this is saying is my ability to provide safety and security, create a space where you are going to learn and grow. And I think probably one of the most mind-blowing things, I was talking to another therapist who loves attachment. One of the things he said at one point is that you can actually increase the capacity for safe, intimate connection with somebody in a therapy session and not say a word. And I think if you ask any therapist to do that, they would be like, what are you talking about? There's CBT and there's DBT and there's all of these other modalities out there that require, you to do something to this other person. And really, this comes from a place of us being, as it says, are available, responsive, and secure, right? We're providing a sense of security and safety in a way that the other person's mind can come back online. They know that we're there in that space with them. And then when that happens, these powerful things happen: the empathy, the learning, the self-wonderment, the flexibility, the resilience, everything that they need to do, the strength in their system can come online more. And that's expanded through this process of just being able to be connected with another human being in a safe way, knowing that there's that safety. So sometimes what we're doing in therapy is that there is no window of tolerance, and there has to be a window of tolerance for a person. That's where all of this, the self-wonderment and the joy and connection occur. Sometimes somebody has had such a difficult life that we're just barely starting to create that space where they can say, there is safety, there is responsiveness, there is security. And so we're either creating that or expanding it to be something more. And I often have to check myself because it is so ingrained that I have to provide something for somebody, or that I need to convince somebody or persuade them or coach them through something. And I'm not saying that there aren't useful applications of that, but the most powerful part about it is that through this safety and security, um, then they're able to have that sense of growth, and there might not be much more of me required.
Yeah, I just go back to always thinking about how the brain and body work. And so, like, we can't learn something without feeling safe, without feeling loved. And so, if we can always remember that part of it, and we could be the best caregivers, we could do everything right, like, and be this place of like, I'm doing it all, and you should feel loved. I'm giving it to you. But it's like it takes both. That's why we started with attachment system, because you need both online. Like, the person has to be able to perceive me as being available, responsive, and secure, and being there. And we'll talk about why some of those obstacles come up, and what some of the healing has to look like for that to be in place too. So the goal that we have with the model that we're going to present to you is to awaken people to their basic biological and relational needs, and assist them in realigning the attachment systems. So they have to wake up first. And if you've ever, had your foot fall asleep and you're trying to wake up your foot, it can be a little painful. It can be a little uncomfortable. But I have to wake up that I need people, that I need others in my life. And then we have to assist in realigning what that looks like.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize that the wake up part is first, and probably everybody here has worked with somebody who has denied or minimizes their needs, right? They lock up, they shut down, they don't want to share, they close off, and they have seen others as super untrusting, and so they are constantly what we would say is they're asleep to those relational needs. They can't see the benefit of those needs because there's been so much hurt or pain. Perhaps there's been trauma that's occurred in their world, and so they can't see it. So the waking up is the most difficult part about it. And when they wake up to it, what we want to do is be able to help realign them one with internally what it is that they need, what they to begin to feel what it is that they need, and then be able to express it. And it becomes pretty clunky, because when we're talking about realigning the attachment systems, it's not just like this waking up this attachment system inside and realigning that, but it also has to be with the people that are around them, because they don't know how to ask for what it is that they need. They don't know how to get their needs met in a healthy way. And so many of their behaviors have been used to either push people away or draw people in some way that has burned the relationship or damage the relationship.
Okay, so this is our part where we're trying to understand diagnosis or behavior. So this is our bold claim in our attachment work. And that is that we believe that within mental health, that we know the pathway and solution to achieve attachment and bonding that creates the capacity for safe, intimate connection, and it improves the quality of life for caregivers and seekers.
So we can help awaken and realign attachment systems that have been injured, and we'll talk about that. And we know the targets to address to make that happen: enhancing the caregiver experience, restoring or establishing personal power to see needs being met, and creating enduring bonds through demonstration of acceptability, unity of purpose, and commitment, and development of the self of the seeker. And the third thing is that the awakened and realigned systems are a combination of our own willingness of self and fully require a secondary party, attachment figures, who reach in when we need and with whom we can reach out. So we absolutely believe that there has to be some motivation on the part of the other person. They need to begin to see this, that they have to be part of this attachment work. This isn't just something that can be done to somebody. We need both people. And I believe that that if we have somebody that is stuck and we're the caregiver, we can actually find ways to help reach in and help wake them.
So just the basic way of saying it is that we heal in relationships and through experiences. And so you all are healers. in the relationship that you'll create with your people and who you're with, that it is through that relationship and the experience that they can have with you as you see and understand some of these principles, that it actually will create this healing. So we're going to jump into the model now. So we've done all this really fun laying down of the foundation and the knowledge and stuff. So we're going to look at 3 pathways to attachment. So we're going to start first with this concept of secure attachment. I have to move this. Okay. So in looking at secure attachment, we're looking at this concept of how do we get our needs met, and how do we get safety and security. So again, how do I feel safe? How do I feel loved? So it starts with this daily living, and we have this this biological wire to assess our environment for stressors or threats. And when we sense that there, or when we notice that there's a threat, that ignites our attachment system. And that is the biological system that pushes us to seek safety through proximity. So it's going to get me close to my attachment person. And I'm going to seek and find and get felt security. So let's look at this just from an infant level and how we can see that. So we have hopefully you've all been around a baby. So Kevin, when a baby is hungry or tired or bored, what do?
It cries.
It cries, right? And what does crying do?
It alerts the caregiver.
Yes.
Wow, after listening to 1,000 times, I think I've got.
You've done good. So crying alerts the caregiver, and it brings the caregiver, or the mom, the dad, whoever, it brings them close and to attend to its needs. And think of how many times over the first year of life that this happens. This is the neural pathway that's being solidified. I have needs, I cry out, it alerts my caregiver, they attune and attend my needs. And you've probably seen it with my little one. I've seen it so many different times. He'll come running crying, and he'll want something, and he's like and I pick him up and I'll do the rocking, and I won't go all crazy on the rocking, being recorded, but I'll do the rocking and soothing, and there will be a moment where all of a sudden he'll do this, and that's felt security. And what's the very next thing that he does, do you think, Kevin?
Wants to go play.
He does. He wants to go play and explore his world. That's the power of secure attachment. Once I feel secure, I'm going to go out and explore my world. Want to add with that?
No, I think this whole idea is really powerful. You can look at this in terms of little babies, right? And we can focus on that and toddlers. But if we just fast forward a little bit, the whole idea of this is that as we get this felt security going, what will happen over time is that the person, as they grow up, they're going to begin to explore their world. And we want that for teenagers and for young adults as they go out and explore what's going on for them. So for young adults, that looks like, getting an apartment or relationships or going to school or all of those sorts of things. And so we want them to have that sense of safety and security, because then they have a tether to come back to, or they know they have a tether to come back to if they need to, which allows them to do that exploring.
Yes. Now there's this very bottom box down on the diagram that says developing self internal working model. And what starts to happen as we grow from about the age of birth until 8 is we're developing our internal working model, which is made up of 3 things: the way I see myself, the way I see others, and the way I see the world. And so somebody with secure attachment, their working model tends to look like, I see myself as lovable, or worthy of love. I'll see others as there for me, or available, and I'll see the world as a relatively safe place. And so through that internal working model, that's going to be dictating how I will seek out my needs, what I will do with that. So we have to have the self and this internal working model that will allow for healthy seeking or healthy advocating for our needs. The other part within secure attachment, or within our whole attachment system, is this concept of threat or threat appraisal. So within our neurology, we have We have what's called neuroception. And neuroception is like our sixth sense. It's our unconscious ability to assess for risk, danger, and safety, often outside of the realm of our awareness. So many of you, I'm sure, have had the experience where you've walked into a room or a store somewhere and you're like, oh, something's off. And that's neuroception. That's that unconscious ability. That is what we're scanning our environment for safety. And remember, safety happens in this part of the brain. And so it's not really within our awareness. And sometimes we can have a faulty neuroception. And that can lead to problems as well, as if we're seeing things around us that there may be a risk or danger that's not really there. We're seeing others as dangerous. So the characteristics of a secure attachment are these four components. So this is what you want to remember: safe haven, separation distress, secure base, and proximity maintenance. So this is what these mean. Secure base is that the attachment figure acts as a base of security from which the child can explore the surrounding environment. So it means they know that they can go out. Proximity maintenance is the desire to be near people we are attracted to. So it means I want to be with somebody. Safe haven means I return back to the attachment figure for comfort or safety when I face fear or distress. And separation distress means that anxiety occurs in the absence of the attachment figure. We want, like, there should be distress when the attachment figure goes away. That's what we're assessing. Like that demonstrates some secure attachment, because it's our person, it's our safety of that. Anything else you want to say on secure attachment? All right. So we are going to watch a video together. Hopefully I did it right with the sound. Janet, you'll have to give me a heads up or somebody will thumbs up if it starts to play. So this is a 2-minute video of what's called the still face experiment. And so what they've done is they have this about 18-month-old that's there with the mom, and they have them play together, and then they ask the mom to not respond for 2 minutes. And what I want you to notice is the secure attachment we just talked about, that pattern going back and forth, they're coordinating play and working together. And then notice what happens when it's taken away and what happens with the other person. Okay.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age. And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions. They turn away. They feel the stress of it. They actually lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing. It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really.
Okay, we're gonna stop sharing for a minute. Before we talk about the video, come off, a few of you come off mute or turn on your cameras. What was it like to even watch the video? Just opening up for it. Does anybody want to share?
Painful. It was difficult to watch.
Yeah. Why? What brought up for you?
I wanted someone to pay attention to the baby.
Anyone else?
I felt the baby's pain, that of the rejection.
Okay. Anyone else have any experience?
I was feeling the same thing. Like this poor little girl, the baby, like, and I wanted to jump in and start giving it the attention that it was longing for.
Yeah.
And I felt desperate, like, where can I go? Where can I go? That's how I felt.
Yeah. Yeah. It's powerful, right? And that anyone else want to share? I don't want to. It's fascinating. I've watched this video probably 1,000 times and I still have that urgent impulse to pick up the baby. It's like distressful for me to watch it. And what's powerful is that is the attachment system. We get soothing as caregivers by soothing the receiver. And if you've ever held a colicky baby that you can't soothe or can't get to, it actually activates us. It's distressful, it's terrible. Like if we can't help our teenager or whatever, like it's like this biological wiring of like we're in this together. We want like we want this experience.
I think it's pretty fascinating too to look at this and think like there is a draw in for us when we see that little baby. Like we want to reach out, we want to comfort the baby. And I showed this to a client once a long time ago. They were adopted, and this is the first time they saw the video. They watched it and they started to cry, and they said, "That's me." She talked about, I do all of those things, but they look so different in an adult, and our desire to reach out and soothe shifts. Because when we see those, if you just picture those behaviors, the crying, which is about trying to get proximity, and then the turning away, which is about hopelessness, we stop trying to soothe. We say, knock it off, get your stuff together. What's the matter with you? You need to pull this together. And that compassion sometimes disappears because we don't see it for what it is. But when you can see those behaviors through that lens of attachment, there's something beyond the behavior that needs to be addressed. Yeah, I saw Martha.
Yeah, thank you. I think I echo everyone, same emotions, but it made me think of me as a mother, right? So you have your first child, it's very easy to connect, but then as you start having more kids and life gets busy, and we do this with in spiritual direction, we get busy. It's so easy to unconsciously not be there.
Yes.
I love it. It's like we planted it.
Yeah.
So there's this whole, so they've redone this experiment because that was just 2 minutes with the baby.
Yeah, just 2 minutes. Isn't that unbelievable?
And they did it with dads and babies. So all the dads are not off the hook. Like they can still have a still face. And then they did it with couples. Have you ever gotten the silent treatment from a partner or peer, right? Like, and now we have these really amazing devices that keep us totally disconnected. And my little one does this thing where he'll tap on me and he goes, if I'm on my phone, play mommy, talk, because he wants that moment. And we have this whole new word in this generation called ghosting. And if you don't know what that means, it's this thing where if you're texting a person you like or a crush you have, and then they're texting back and forth, you have this text, and then you never hear from them again.
Well, and there's another part of it, Martha. I'm with you. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been so totally aware of the work I'm doing while my kids are trying to talk with me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm listening. I'm listening. They know. Like, I am not actually present in that conversation, and I'm giving the still face to my kids. I have had to learn to be very aware, and it is so hard because when we're in the middle of something, like but it's that same concept. What they're looking for is that connection and the support and the nurturing. And so I agree. I think as parents we do that, right? Sometimes we do that. And that's okay. Like, there's a point of being able to repair. There's a lot that goes into this. It's not about like a single interaction or whatever. So
Yeah,
I
the
think
research shows that we'll miss those cues about 70% of the time, and we can still have a secure attachment.
woohoo, we don't have to be perfect,
Right.
which is really good news.
Yeah.
I think the other part to remember is sometimes teenagers and young adults do this to their parents. They give still face to their parents, and that can be super distressing as parents. And think about that of what family members do when they get the still face, right? What are their behaviors that come up that begin to amp up that would be equal to that crying and screeching and reaching out, turning away? And sometimes that looks like moves that are power and control, right? Sometimes it looks like punishment, because we want to gain that power back. So there's a lot that goes into this idea of the still face and of not having that moment of attunement and connection when it's needed. Any other thoughts anybody wants to ask about that?
Okay. We're gonna go back to share. Wait, did I miss one?
I wonder. Did we miss somebody's hand? I don't know. Okay.
Real quick, there was something in the chat. It says, does your work parallel the work of Daniel Siegel? It says.
The majority of our work, really, I would say, is based on the research of McEwenser and Shaver. Um, they do a lot of work on adult attachment. Yeah, so I'd say more based on than Daniel Siegel.
Yeah, but we've pulled stuff from we've looked at Daniel Siegel's work and pulled it. Like, there's a parallel process for it of his understanding of the brain and connection of longing.
Well, yeah, the model of
the model of the
itself
brain
is
yes.
Daniel Siegel.
Good question. Okay, you can see my screen, right? I did it. Okay.
And are there any other questions up to this point beyond the secure attachment, anything else?
I think one comment I would make for us as spiritual directors is you talked about available, secure, and responsive. For us as spiritual directors, knowing that the ultimate secure attachment is with God, and from there, all other things align appropriately. As spiritual directors, for us, it's very important that we look at it as kind of being the gaze of God's love upon this person, being that place where they are loved as they are and able to explore what's going on inside them, what God is doing in their life, to really be aware and understand what's going on inside them in order to understand where God is, where perhaps the enemy is, so that they can follow in the path of goodness. But we would use a language a little bit different, but the exact same heart of being that gaze of love that helps the human person know that they are safe. And in that safety, it's kind of an echoing of what we all knew once in Eden, or what we all were created from to know. So I found it very beautiful what you were saying at first. And I would translate it a little bit into perhaps spiritual director's language.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that was really helpful to give that framework, because that sets it up really powerfully. Thank you, Janet. Okay, so we just looked at secure attachment. We know what that is. If we can look at this next pathway of misaligned attachment, and this is when attachment does not develop as intended.
So this is the one where you might be able to pull in kind of the map of where they're at. So for this one, we start out in distressed living. If we just look at the very top of the picture, without relationships, and I would say without secure relationships, we live in distress. So we start out in distress living, and then there can be something of a threat or a stressor. It can be small or it can be big. Um, it, it ignites our attachment system. And you'll see that blue leaf in the background, and that represents emotional distress. So we have a threat. The emotional distress gets big because of this threat. And I guess the threat, I mean, if I wanted to give some examples of it, it could be for some of the people that we've worked with, it could be a feeling of rejection, a comment that somebody said that hurts. It could be a loss, or it could be a death. It could be somebody, saying something mean and gossip. I mean, it could be really anything, right? And so this threat comes, and it ignites our attachment system. And again, that attachment system is the we're biologically wired for connection, and so we have this desire to reach out to somebody else to get the safety and security. Well, in this misaligned attachment, what happens is that's all filtered through the internal working model. So what I do with this threat or this distress depends on how I see myself, how I see others, and how I see the world. So if I see myself as unlovable, or I see others as critical and judgmental, or I see the world as an unfair or unsafe place, then what am I supposed to do with this distress? Or in secure attachment, what I would do is I would reach out, I would talk to somebody, I'd have that sense of security, and then I would continue to explore my world. So here we don't have that. And so then what happens is they end up using a secondary attachment strategy. So we've referred to these secondary attachment strategies throughout this presentation. Nikki, if I'll remind you, Nikki talked about the primary attachment strategy. Primary attachment strategy is proximity seeking, right? If I can reach out, I can get my needs met. That's proximity seeking. Secondary attachment strategies are what we're about to talk about. When I can't use proximity seeking for whatever reason, I will use secondary attachment strategies. And the first one is that I'm going to seek somebody out, but I'm not going to find them. For whatever reason, that person is not going to be available, responsive, and secure when I reach out. Or, and this is really important, I'm going to perceive that they're not available, responsive, and secure. And I don't care if you're the best caregiver in the world, if for whatever reason I'm perceiving my caregiver as not being available, responsive, and secure, it's that perception that really matters. And so it feels a little bit unfair that that's the case, but we have to work within the perception of that person. So they're seeking somebody out, they crave that connection, they want connection with another person, they're seeking it out, they're not quite finding it. And so what they end up doing is they end up overemphasizing their helplessness, their neediness, their childishness, or their dependence in order to get somebody who should be available, responsive, and secure to be available, responsive, and secure. And so they're going to do this in a few different ways, but just so you know, what happens with this is that you're going to feel like you're being pulled in by a rope. I don't know if you've ever experienced that with anybody, or watched that happen in the people that you're working with, but it's like you're forced to respond, and you're going to have the urge to use words like they're attention seeking, or they're manipulative. And I would discourage the use of those words. Right. The question for me that I'll ask, as we would train staff around this model or other people, if somebody comes up to me and says so and so is being, they're just manipulators. My question for them is why does that person have to be crafty with you in order to get their needs met? And so what that does is it turns it into a relational experience. Right? There is something going on. They don't know how to get their needs met in a healthy way. And so they do end up overemphasizing their helplessness, neediness, childishness, or their dependence, right? They do that, but there's a need behind it, and we want to understand it. And the ways that they do this, kind of the pattern of behavior that they'll use, there's three different parts to that. One of it is they're going to engage in crisis seeking. And what happens with crisis seeking is that that there's going to be kind of this big thing that goes on that you have to respond to. In our world of mental health we work in, that could be somebody saying they're suicidal, or it could be somebody using self-injury. And it's a rush. Like you have to hurry and get there to help them because this is a pretty threatening situation. Well, what happens behind the scenes of all of that is if we go back and kind of look at this idea of the threat, the stressor, and then that being filtered through the internal working model, is that the person has experienced some sort of threat, and then um, because they believe usually that they're not lovable, they're not worthy in some way, then what happens is they don't believe that their problems are worth talking about, that somebody isn't going to really be interested or listen or be able to help them. And so they continually try and manage the problem until they can't anymore. And then they just sort of all comes out, and we're at this place of crisis. And it draws the person in, and they get that person to be responsive to them in that moment, but not in a way that they really needed, right? They needed that person to be there previously, but they couldn't ask for it. The second thing that they might do is they might engage in passive seeking behaviors. And passive seeking behaviors are um, sometimes very silent. um, you might you might get the sense that you're supposed to follow the person as they walk out. They might slam the door, and you know that you're supposed to go follow them. Um, and so you get the sense of they're angry. They want to talk, but they're not going to ask. They're going to be loud about it, perhaps, and you know that you need to go and help soothe them. And then the third way that they might engage in this seek don't find is they might use misguided seeking. And what that looks like is reaching out people outside of the attachment system in order to get um, some version of those needs met. And again, in the world that we work with, that can often look like somebody using a Tinder hookup, right? Where it's something like that, where they engage in some unhealthy behavior. It's some form of connection, but that connection isn't a healthy connection, and it's not in the realm of their attachment figures. And so it doesn't actually get them what it is that they need to resolve the conflicts that they're in. All of these.
Then, can you speak to something like adults that we may work with, that we may see, like, is this where like some kind of, talk about misguided seeking, pornography,
Yes.
addictions, things like this? Are these kinds of things that would go in that area?
Yeah, affairs, pornography. You would see it with social media, like connecting with like how many likes can I get, or who are my friend, like being online and away from your attachments.
Yeah, and in the case of this, it really is important as we go through these different strategies that are used. So on the seek, don't find, the idea is going to be kind of a desperate need for connection is what they're looking for. So, we'll talk about this in just a minute, but you could see pornography use being a seek, don't find strategy, but I can also see it being on the other side. And so we really need to understand, like, is this person reaching out for something, kind of that desperate need for some attachment somewhere? There's a desire for connection, and you're right, all of those things, like an affair could be part of that, pornography could be part of that, substance use in some modalities or some uses of that could be part of this seek don't find.
Could there also be like things like even overworking or overserving, or ways that people get affirmation or whatever in ways that are really outside um, their normal attachment, that maybe start out healthy and end up being unhealthy?
Absolutely. Those are all really great examples of that, right? The idea is to be connected in some way. So I'm going to work more so people notice me more. I'm going to serve more so people are connected more with me. But in that,
Or
they don't
need
ever
me,
get
perhaps,
what's that?
or need me.
Yes, and that's all that passive seeking, right? Like I just have to like, I don't say what I actually need, but I'm just going to keep hustling. I'm trying to get my worth through other people's affirmation.
Yeah, and there's something about that where if you'll look at that internal working model, in this seek don't find space, there's generally a negative belief about self and a positive belief about others, right? I see myself as unworthy or unlovable, and I see others as powerful or good. And so that disparity between the two often keeps them from reaching out directly or seeking is what we would seeking getting those needs met. They're just not worthy of it. They're not lovable enough. The other people are better than their problems. My problems just aren't big enough, right? And so they're missing that seeking aspect of it. That's in the healthy way. So those are all really great examples of that, Janet. Really perfect. What we call this is a hyperactivating strategy. So what I want to say about hyperactivating strategy is that it is a person who is highly activated, like their body is highly activated. They're in a lot of distress. And in that distress, they end up activating the people that are around them. And I hate the word strategy as it's tied to this, because what it sounds like is a person is sitting, in a dark room planning and plotting their next steps. And that's not really what's going on. This is how they've learned, what they've experienced through life, of how they should get their needs met. And it's constantly reinforced. And we'll show you that in just a minute. Jana,
Okay.
yeah.
Kevin, Yana has a question. Yana, feel free.
Thank you. I wanted to know if sometimes these addictive behaviors are also a response to just the anxiety they're feeling. So is there a difference or a way of seeing it where it's not necessarily a response to lack of attachment, but rather just wanting the relief from the big feelings that they're experiencing? And how would you know the difference of that?
So it's
Well, yeah, I was going to say, as we get to the next one, it'll give you a little more of a balanced perspective on some other ways that this can be viewed as well.
But I was going to say, Yana, the anxiety that they're feeling is typically rooted in a relational experience somewhere that could have been early on, or from a belief or a way of being treated, because our ability to self-regulate, our ability to manage our emotions is a byproduct of healthy co-regulation. So self-regulation isn't a skill we learn. Our nervous system remaining calm is because of our ability to have had experiences in co-regulation. So all of it is about managing emotional distress, everything, but it's typically rooted in a place of relationships. And it could have been my internal working model has created something of that, but it is that emotional distress. Did that answer your question? Okay.
All right, so let's go to the other side. So we have the first one, which was seek, don't find, and this one is a don't seek. And what happens with this one is the person has learned that people aren't trustworthy. They've had experiences where being connected has been either emotionally or physically unsafe. And so what they do is when they have that threat or that stressor, they deactivate their system. They shut their system down, and they'll be experiencing all of the same internal distress that somebody who uses the hyperactivating strategy would. They become masterful at shutting down. They want to even look like they're not in distress. And for us in the therapeutic world, these are people that, and I'm sure that you've seen these people in the work that you're doing, is that they're masterful at making the 3 feet deep look like it's 12 feet deep. If we're looking at this like in a swimming pool kind of a metaphor, and they'll stay very surface level because they don't want to have this other part of them exposed. And where you see somebody using the seek, don't find, or the hyperactivating strategy, wanting to connect with other people, this desperate desire to connect, these people are demonstrating a desire to protect themselves from people. So you have connect or protect. And what's going on here is they're going to do what it takes to get what they want while maintaining distance, control, and self-reliance. So all of this emotional distress is shut down. I'm not going to let anybody else in. I'm not even maybe going to acknowledge some of this distress myself. I'm just going to do it myself. I'm going to manage it myself. And they'll do this using 3 other patterns of behavior. The first one is control strategies. And what that looks like sometimes is controlling, or it can be perfectionism for one, is that I'm going to make sure that everything I do is right. So nobody looks in, nobody has anything to say about it, nobody can give me any feedback. I'll just get it right all the time. It can be controlling other people in the environment, sometimes feeling like you're moving people around like pawn pieces, right? So in the eating disorder world, there could be some idea of control around some of this as well. The second way is through self-destructive behaviors, and that can look like um, addictions. Here we'd find substance abuse, right? Secretive self-injury might be another part that people would engage in. And these self-destructive behaviors, what happens is again, I don't want anybody else to know what's going on. I'm in distress, and I'm going to use these other behaviors that are really damaging to me, and I'm going to, which isn't their thought process, but I'm going to just sort of like tune out from using these strategies, using those behaviors. And the third one is avoidance. And avoidance could be, we could fit pornography in here, we could fit video games, we could fit fantasy world, anything that takes us out of the space of having to think about what our problems are. And so we have these two spaces with the hyperactivating strategies, we have the deactivating strategies. One, the idea is to connect, the other the idea is to protect from people.
And Janet, would you have any language for the people you're working with in these types of don't seek patterns?
Well, I think the things that you said, control and perfectionism, and even I think, well, we could pull the crowd of things that we see of avoidant, but even the control of self to like try to self-righteous with perfect, even spiritual behavior.
Yeah. Yes. Good. Okay.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Yeah, someone just said legalism, right?
Yeah. Nice.
And the whole, I think when you talked about avoiding is, I'm fine, everything's fine.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really interesting because underneath all of these different behaviors, there's so much hurt and pain, and so many layers of guardedness or protectiveness. They just don't want anybody to know it, and it's really powerful when you can get through all of this and get to that person. It is amazing what happens, and generally people don't cut through it.
Well, someone also said in our group chat, just avoiding being vulnerable.
Yes.
And staying on the surface. But I think that the things that you spoke of, this is in any world, especially right now, is, media is a huge, phones, the TV, the video games. I mean, even among very mature people, you can see this subtly creep in rather than dealing with the hard of the interior work.
For sure. How easy is it to come home from a really difficult day and go turn on the video games or go turn on the TV and not really have to connect with another human being about it, and how easy that is to pile up. And then we look at this not pandemic. What am I thinking of? The surge epidemic, yeah, of anxiety and depression that are going on in this world, right? Like when I look at depression, probably the way that I would say, and I know this is very oversimplified, I get this, but when I look at that, I think that's somebody who's lost their voice. There's some deactivation that's going on there, like they've lost power somehow to get their needs met in the world, and so so even in those things, you can see attachment kind of at the heart of what's going on, and need for being able to get needs met, but not really being able to get it.
Well, and like someone just put in the chat, for us as spiritual directors should not only see that in human relationships, but also in our relationship with God. Yes. That there will be an avoidance prayer. The person will not be vulnerable with God and really reveal what's going on before God, even that there will be that classic, hiding with the fig leaves and so the whole, we can see it in the spiritual world in different points of desolation of people begin to chip away bit by bit of the things that bring them life. First and foremost, prayer.
Nice.
Absolutely.
And I love all those comments of what you're seeing and saying, because it's resonates so well with what we are. And I go back to if you see those arrows on the diagram, we call it the neutralization loop. And when I'm always using this map and thinking of somebody, I always look at it through this lens of they're just trying to eliminate their emotional distress. And there's some level of, okay, that's what we do, like I need to decompress. I don't want to talk with somebody for a minute. Like I'm just gonna like
Take my
space, watch this TV show. But what it is we're always trying to look beyond the behavior. Is it somebody's is it their model of how they do relationships, how they do the relationship with God, how they do the relationships with others, how they do the relationships with their family? Because those are the things that lead to problems and struggles. Because hyperactivating strategies, that one where it's in crisis or it's passive or it's going outside of their system, that burns caregivers. If affairs in relationships kills relationship, like those are things that will kill the relationship. And the deactivating strategy creates this false sense of security of like, oh yeah, everything's fine. Like we had no idea, right? Like, because they're keeping it surface, they're hustling for their worthiness, trying to like just get it going, which creates more anxiety and more distress. And it usually is all rooted back in that, how do I see myself? How do I see others? How do I see the world? And then how am I as a person?
One last thing on this slide here is that sometimes you'll have people that do both the seek and don't find and the don't seek, and so you'll see all of those behaviors, and it feels pretty confusing, a little bit of a disorganized attachment and what's going on with that one, and that's very difficult because responding to each of those, what you need to do with that's a little bit different, and so it becomes a pretty tricky place to be and a painful place to be in relationships, actually. So then what happens with all of this is that we end up, if we look at kind of the way that this all plays through, the distress living, the threat, ignites the attachment system. We use one of the either hyperactivating or deactivating strategies. As we engage in that behavior, you see the emotional distress rise until they use that strategy. And then what happens is the distress decreases, they get a perceived threat resolution, and they go back up on the top. And one of the big problems with this is, I mean, there's many problems with this, but one of the things that happens is it continues to reinforce the internal working model that I'm not worthy or lovable, and I have to get my needs met in this unhealthy way, or my needs don't matter to other people, or other people are untrustworthy or unsafe, and that just gets perpetuated over and over and over again.
Well, and there was, oh, Janet, you're on mute.
Someone asked in the
Oh, you're back on mute.
Sorry about that. Someone asked in the chat, do you see these strategies become more ingrained and worse over time and more difficult to heal?
Yes, more ingrained, worse over time, and they become personality. And they'll often have what, a personality disorder or something of that. You'll hear terms like dependent or narcissist or antisocial, like you'll hear these borderline, these big terms, and that there is hope for healing, but it does get ingrained. Those neural pathways, this way of doing it, gets reinforced and ingrained over and over. And so there is hope and healing that can happen, but it does make it more difficult over time, for sure, if we've had this pattern over and over again.
Good question. Any other questions on the misaligned attachment? This is the one where I hope you can begin to see people you work with and kind of understand where they might fit in all of this. And what I'll say about this is so much of, in our experience, the mental health world is that people focus on the behaviors. They're trying to do what it takes to just stop the behavior. And what we really want to do is move beyond the behavior. We want to see the person beyond the behavior. And just like that little baby, right? Like we can understand that that baby is crying because it needs something. And all of the manifestations of the behaviors that you see as adults, if you can cut through the behavior and say, what's the need behind this? Then we have a place to intervene in a way that we haven't before. And it's in that providing that available, responsive, and secure relationship that healing comes in.
Okay, a couple things. First of all, do you care if we take a moment just to invite some comments? On our chat, someone said, how do we help to stop the cycle of behavior once it's been identified? So that's a question, in the chat. I would also open that up to you as spiritual directors, because I know that all of you, including myself, see that through time and spiritual direction and good listening, significant amount of healing that occurs. And so I guess I would want to know, like, how do you all see these different misaligned attachments? Because you have to see it in your spiritual directions. I know I do. And how do you perceive that as you create a space where this person is safe and receives the gaze of God's love, and you open this up to the grace of God? What is it that you all see happen with time? Along with the question of, from Nikki and Kevin's perspective, how do we assist here?
Yeah, we would love to hear from you guys too, and we'll offer some of our thoughts.
Well, I really appreciate everything you shared, and I find that to be so true in spiritual direction that I do. And I love particularly the part about creating the space and that safe environment. And then more and more just feeling like it's just about listening and being present and watching the Holy Spirit come in and find that place of healing. And that's become more of a observer than a director of it. And boy, that's a real change, because I have a background in nursing where I'd go into the patient and fix them, and had the right medicine to hang if it was an IV or an emergency.
Yeah. Wow.
But this is a total relearning, and it's very powerful and very holy. It's a real spiritual experience to see that healing. And I do believe that it gets to the core of all of those other things that are not just stress. I really appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Was there other comments?
Hi, my name's Janet McLaughlin. One thing I was reflecting on today with a different group of spiritual directors was on listening from Father Benedict's book, but he talks about the importance of how we are gaze, our eye-to-eye contact, and basically even before we say anything, and even before we do anything, just that how we are physically present to the person in that, in a sense, an intimacy of looking eye to eye. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think we talk, and maybe next time we'll be able to talk about this as one of the tools, is really attuned listening. And it's listening with the eyes, it's listening with the heart, it's listening with the ears, it's listening with the body. People will see all of that as part of your connection. But at the heart of that is really this concept of attunement. We see the person, right? And it's not that we see the person from up here looking down. We come here and we see them. And I will tell you from my work that some of the most sacred experiences are when you are sitting across from somebody and they know that they've been seen for the first time. Like somebody finally got them. That is a sacred experience. They're seen, they're known, what they feel matters to you. And that's more than just the way that we listen. It's a way of being that we bring, provides a sense of safety and security for the other person. They feel that as they walk in because they know, right? They can sense that as they walk in. And it is beautiful to be able to have somebody, when you're able to get that, you cut below all of the stuff that they've thrown out to everybody else, all of the distractions, all of the behavior. And in your own way, you say, I see you. I see that you're hopeless. I see that you're lost. I see that you're, or that you believe that you're not loved. And that moment of just being with them, again, not from up here, but right here with them, is part of what breaks that cycle. It's part of what creates that healing. It's one of 1,000 moments that they need to have that allows them to be able to break that cycle. They start to question the old internal working model. They have to, because now something's different. And then sometimes that's painful for them to be able to start to grab onto that, and they might push back. But as they continue to have those experiences, it changes them. Just like you felt something when you watched that video, it changed the physiology inside of you. It created a feeling inside of you. That's what's happening when you're with other people and you're doing that. It changes them. And so that's why we say this isn't a cognitive experience. This isn't us teaching them something. It's us being something with them.
And for us, what I would say is that is a moment of, our Lord came as a human being to not look down from above, to look eye to eye with us, person to person, human to human, and to bring the divine to the human. And so when we as spiritual directors, you as counselors, when we have that gaze, it is an incarnational reality of the love of God that can change everything and open a space, exploration of things, and healing, and secure healing of wounds, division, sin, but also the opening of the possibility of securely attaching to God, and then freely and in a more life-giving way attaching to human creatures which are given to us by God.
Well said.
Well, it's beautiful, Janet. Any other
I
thoughts?
would
Yeah.
I have one other question. Somebody asked about um, your work paralleling Siegel's, but also Conrad Baer. How would you see his work on affirmation reflected in this attachment model?
I don't know that we're.
I know it barely, like in the affirmation work, and we'll talk about it a little bit next time about the essential self. Well, we may have a few minutes, but we'll show you there's targets that we want to hit. So the essential self is needing to feel acceptability, and so from my understanding of his work, it's in the reflection of somebody else, I can build up acceptability.
Mike, you have your hand raised. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think probably my experience has been perhaps with people who have less distress, who are less disabling distress. I think therapists have some young people who are just having trouble coping. But kind of amplifying what you were saying, Janet. Ultimately, well, what I believe when we give attunement, when we give that connection, we create a pathway where the person can start talking about their interior life. But with that discussion, we start being able to point out to them how God is touching them and how they can actually receive attunement from God. Yeah. And when that connection starts to form, now they're connected to the ultimate source of self everything, the ultimate source of their needs.
Yeah, that's a really powerful statement, because one of the things that's happening is people are coming in to talk to us and their lids are flipped, right? And this part of the brain that would be responsible for learning the things that they need to know is just in this place of panic and fear. And you get to that place of attunement, and you're right, you get to say the hard things to them that nobody has been able to do, because you've got them to that place of a sense of safety and calm, and you turn them and you teach them those things, and they can connect at that point, because there is that sense of safety and security. That's absolutely correct.
And part of what we're helping them do is recognize what is it that God's touching you, and what does that feel like, versus when is it something that's just false, that's not, because ultimately it's not truthful. The beauty of God being the ultimate source is that they're not experiencing what they need. There's a falsehood in it also. And for them to be able to recognize that, turn away from the falsehood, turn towards God, and experience more and more. And so we talk about discernment. I mean, I think that's really what discernment's really about.
Great point.
Yeah. I don't know on a content level if there was more that you all wanted to get to tonight or not. Just want to make sure we give space for that.
Yes, I want to we're going to show two more things, and then we'll come back and have a wrap up discussion, and then kind of talk about what we'll go over next time as well. So in answering the question, like, what do you do with that and how do you do it? Like, what we want to look at is this third pathway, which is integrated attachment. And it's what you all were talking about. Like, once they have that space and we start to build that window of tolerance, we can turn them towards God, like all of those things. It integrates the parts of them that have been wounded or hurt, that haven't experienced that, and it starts to get the whole brain online. It gets all of that integrated, and it's done through these 4 targets. So this is what we're always looking at, and so this is where we're going to spend our time next time. Is we're going to look at the different tools or strategies or ways of being that we can use within each of these targets. And it's kind of like there's not like a step-by-step pattern of it. It's more of a understanding of how we're trying to get them back online, get them to receive that love, and so that they can receive even more from God, and then in the human, like all of that piece. It's working with these 4 things. So the first one is the developing self. And we're going to talk about what that means and the 4 elements of that, but there is a part of us that is responsible for our journey, right? It's not everyone, like how we show up, how we're willing to be vulnerable. Like there's a risk that comes into that, and being able to have that, the seeker experience moves into that, right? If I can be vulnerable and seek and take that risk, ask the question, it restores my power.
And generally what we see when people have lost their power to seek, they're not good seekers. They've lost power spiritually, physically, intellectually, relationally, emotionally, any of those categories, and one tends to affect the other, right? So if I've lost my power physically, right, and I can't go out and do things anymore, but let's say I have a hurt back, which sometimes happens, and people will like say, hey, come join this basketball game, we're getting together to play, and I can't go do that anymore. Now I've lost relational power, right? So there's the physical aspect, there's relational, and then if that happens over time, I can lose my emotional power. And then what happens over time is I can become discouraged, and I can lose that spiritual power. And so you can see how it's a little bit like a web as you begin to lose that power to seek and power to have the connections that we need. And so our goal is to restore that power to seek.
The third target is the caregiver experience, and that's helping the person who, or the people, as you do in your work, is how they can be received in their family, how they can recognize and coach the person of what they need. So there's this desire of a caregiver experience and how we can be good caregivers. And then finally, aligned relationships. And what that means is that we have commitment, unity, and connection, that we're working towards the same thing. We're aligned of what our goal is, what we're wanting. And so we have to have that safety within there. So the last thing I'm going to show you is this diagram, and then we'll come back together. And because this is the meaning of integrated attachment. It's taking those things and creating this person that's been in distress at whatever level, and helping them develop self through their relationship with you, through God, through others, so that when there is a threat appraisal and it ignites that biological attachment system that's been hardwired and ingrained in us, that when we have this urge to reach out, that we have what's called this internal alignment, and we move towards reaching out, we move towards it, which creates that seeker experience. And the caregiver is there ready to receive it. The person who's our people are there ready to receive it. And that is the enduring bond. That is the trust and the faith that has to go through in those two things, that I can reach out and somebody can be there for me and I can experience that. And it's over and over, this broaden and build cycle, having these experiences over and over that heal us. And that creates that integrated attachment.
Yeah, just I would say that as this starts to happen, it's a very clunky experience at first, because it's very difficult for somebody to wake up and then try out that try seeking in a healthy way, or try seeking at all. And so, it might be spotty at first, or it might be uncomfortable at first, or clumsy in some ways. Over time, what we're looking for is for that to become a more consistent pattern of interaction that occurs within with families and individuals.
Okay, so I'm going to stop share, invite you to come back and then just open it up for any comments or questions or discussion. Our next time together, we'll spend more time in those 4 targets, and we'll teach you. We've written a workbook on it of different ways of being, or tools, or however you want to say it, like, of what you can do to help the person get a better sense of self, how they can develop self, how you can help them restore their power, how you can help them coach their caregiver, how you can be a good caregiver or receive, like, what is it that you can do, and then how to create alignment in relationships. So that's where we'll spend our time, in a little more practicality. We spend a lot of time today more in like learning and creating this foundation, but I think it's so important, because this is a long game. This is the healing and elongate. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's through these experiences, and yet it's the lasting change, and it's the change that continues without a therapist with them, without a spiritual director and whatever it may be. Like, it continues, where it goes into their home, and then it becomes part of them. And so it's important that we just have a clear foundation and language, so we're understanding how to beat this long game, how to stay in it and continue.
I think just the thing I would add on top of that is that it's all the stuff that we talked about today is really talking about a way of being, right? And it's about being able to see through the behaviors to the need beyond the behavior. Any behavior you see, any unhealthy behavior, if you can stop and look and say, like, is this, and really, it doesn't matter totally if it's a hyperactivating or deactivating strategy. Don't get caught up on that part. But what's the need behind the behavior? Hyperactivating strategy, there's a desire for connection, and they're doing it in an unhealthy way, and that helps us understand what's going on a little bit more in that person's life. It helps us understand a little bit more about how they see themselves. If they're using a deactivating strategy, it tells us a little more about how they're seeing themselves and what they've experienced in relationships in the past. And if we can cut past the behavior and look at the human being behind it and the need behind it, and see that little crying baby who has experienced a still face, right? And understand that what's going on here is in some way a need is not being met, then we have so much power for intervention. So much power in intervention.
Okay, thank you guys so much. I open this up to questions, comments, thoughts, reflections that any of you may have in regard to what Nikki and Kevin have presented to us. I'm sure that from many of you, and I know I do, as a spiritual director, work in conjunction with a mental health therapist, with our directees, and it's good to hear the mental health perspective, and we have our own lens, which is, all inclusive of the whole person. I just wonder if any of you have, any thoughts or reflections as you're listening to this.
Janet, I was just thinking just what a extreme humbling privilege it is to share that sacred space that
really it's something that I can't give that person on my own, but it's something that as a vessel God gives to that person through me. And that I just feel like it takes I mean, I have to be the best, I have to show up and be the best me, but I'm just so glad that it's really God that meets God that meets them, because it's such a sacred space.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you. Yana, did you have something you wanted to share?
Well, I'm just thinking about how sometimes a direct team might find you to be their only safe, and perhaps they're in a dysfunctional environment, and now that pattern is being like they can't step out of it because it's being reinforced, and yet um, their vocation stand by perhaps lack of capacity in the other, the mental illness of the other. And um, many times there seems to be some disparity also between what is the intention of the other. Is it a personal attack that they're being triggered by, or is it something that they need to step back and say, wait a minute, this isn't about me, this is about this other person's capacity. And yet they have this healing that needs to be happening for themselves, and you're the only secure base. Despite their efforts to reach God, you know, having that a physical person.
I think there's a little bit of God's providence in this. I had a daughter-in-law that her home was a safe space. And she said to her husband, they love me unconditionally. And we just don't know what God is working with in the other parts of the family. She is now at a point that this mother who was not a mother in the capacity that she needed is now back in her life and responding to her more as a mom to a daughter. This is like 5 children later and many years, but all the time she came to our home, and we're miles apart. It was a safe haven, that sacred space you're talking about. Just to keep loving them. I don't know. I was just amazed. Shouldn't be amazed. God does all kinds of things, but I guess just believe in that part of it too. I think that gives us hope.
And yet I think that because if you see it in that place of you might be their only physical person right now, you're creating a window of tolerance that will increase their ability to have safe, intimate connection. And in a system that it's a big reason why we do family work, and because our goal is not just to shift the person or look at the identified patient or whatever it may be within that, but to look at the whole family. And as one can shift, then we can look at like what is called second order of change. So rules, like unspoken rules of the family, or roles, the different roles people play, the unspoken expectations or even spoken expectations. So as one member can change, it will force the system to have to do some changing. They'll either try to pull the person back in to play the old role or keep that old dysfunctional rule going. And so it is a long game. And so if you kind of keep that in mind of like, my goal is to create that window of tolerance that will allow for them to have safe, intimate connection, that it's fascinating when the whole brain is working. We make different decisions and we act different ways, and then they may be able to reflect that back to that person or somebody in their family, or they may choose how they do life a little differently. I hope that help.
And of course, for us as spiritual directors, as we continue to encourage them to develop an intimate relationship with God, the ultimate healer, and with their psychology and their human person, and we bring that before God. we've all seen the power of what God is able to do with them. Well, I thank you, Nikki and Kevin, so much for being with us tonight. We look forward to next month when we'll do part 2, which is February 9th. Mark your calendars. And we'll go ahead and close with a prayer. Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, we thank you so much for the fact that you have created us in love and for love, and that you sustain us with love. And yet we understand that because of the presence of sin, love has been fractured. Our relationship with you, with ourselves, with others, created things, and even our capacity to give and receive. But Lord, you heal all things, and you give us many avenues to heal because we are a whole person. We thank you for this time that you have given us to really listen more deeply to the ways that as human beings, as psychological beings, we attach, understanding ultimately that our attachment to you is the source of all secure attachments and the source of all healing. Lord, we thank you for the gift of Kevin and Nikki and the gift that they have been to us. And we ask, Lord, your blessing upon them and upon all of us. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much. And we will see you next month.
What an honor. Thank you.
You.
Thank you.